Usually when we talk about the foundations of a civilization, there is this expectation of, like, physical mass.
Right. Something you can touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You look at a skyscraper, and you see the steel beams, the poured concrete, the deep rebar anchors, and you can just point to it and say, well, there it is. That is what is holding it all up.
It is tangible, it is measurable, and I mean, most importantly, it is comforting
Yeah.
because we naturally gravitate toward things that we can calculate and verify with our own eyes,
Yeah, we really do. But then you step into the world of sociology and human behavior, and suddenly that structural blueprint is just completely useless.
Oh, completely.
We are looking at an architectural landscape that is entirely invisible. I mean, it is the absolute definition of a structural blind spot. Because today, for this deep dive, we're going to look at what is actually holding the skyscraper up. And spoiler alert for you listening, it is not the concrete.
Definitely not.
We are pulling from an incredibly thought-provoking excerpt today. It's from Time Traveler's Paradox. Specifically, we are diving into a dialogue in section 15. It's called The Architecture of Trust.
Such a good chapter.
It really is. It features these two characters, Maya and Nick, and they are basically trying to deconstruct what prevents human society from simply collapsing in on itself every single day.
And I highly encourage you, as you listen today, to just keep an open, analytical mind. We are going to be sitting right at this chaotic, fascinating intersection of neuroscience, sociology, and evolutionary biology.
Yeah, our mission here is to explore this really radical idea presented in the source material. We are going to examine how trust is not just some, warm, fuzzy moral sentiment that we put on a greeting card.
Right. It's not just a nice idea.
Exactly.
Sure.
It is a hardwired biological infrastructure.
Yeah.
It literally dictates the success or failure of entire societies. And we're going to break down exactly how that works physically in your brain.
We essentially have to completely reframe how we define trust today. I mean, we are moving away from a philosophical concept, and we are diving into the literal chemistry of the human nervous system.
To understand how everyday cooperation actually functions on a cellular level.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Maya kicks off this whole exploration in the text with a really fundamental question about what makes people cooperate with complete strangers. Every single day.
It's wild when you actually think about it.
It is, because we do this constantly. I mean, you buy a coffee from a barista you do not know, just assuming they didn't poison it.
Right.
You drive on a 2-lane highway, separated by a thin line of yellow paint from heavy metal boxes moving at 70 miles an hour, driven by people you have never met.
Which is terrifying when you say it like that.
I know, right? Or, you deposit your paycheck into a digital bank managed by strangers. And the text points out that it isn't the laws or the police enforcing this behavior minute by minute.
No, they can't be everywhere. So the thesis Nick presents to answer this is just profound. He defines trust not as a feeling, but as a neurological asset.
A neurological asset.
Yeah, meaning it has a functional chemical reality. So let's break down the biological mechanism that they detail in the text. When two people experience trust, or when you are just in an environment that you perceive as trustworthy, it triggers a very specific cascade in the brain.
Okay.
The primary actor here is the sudden release of oxytocin.
Oh, oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, right?
Right, yeah. That is the common label for it, but calling it just a bonding hormone almost diminishes its mechanical function.
Really? How so?
Well, it doesn't just make you feel affectionate or cuddly. It has a critical regulatory purpose. When oxytocin floods your nervous system, it actively suppresses the production of cortisol.
And cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone.
Exactly. So by chemically lowering that cortisol, oxytocin physically dampens your brain's threat detection circuitry.
Oh, wow. So you literally stop looking for hidden dangers.
You do. Your guard drops. And biologically speaking, that is exactly what enables complex cooperation without the need for constant exhausting vigilance.
It is almost like flipping a master switch in the brain from defend to collaborate.
That's a great way to put it.
And the text scales this up, right? It goes from the individual to the whole society. It explains that a high-trust society achieves what Nick calls neurological efficiency.
Which is a huge concept. It means the society operates with an incredibly low cognitive overhead.
Because people aren't constantly afraid of theft or betrayal.
Right. So transactions happen at lightning speed. conflicts find resolution quickly, innovation just flourishes because people can share their, half-baked early-stage ideas without the paralyzing fear that a colleague or a competitor is going to steal their intellectual property.
Thinking about this concept of neurological efficiency, an analogy comes to mind that I think perfectly captures the mechanics of this. It sounds like trust is essentially a society's operating system.
Oh, I like that.
Think about your personal computer, right? When the operating system is highly optimized and everything is functioning securely, your programs run instantly. You click an application, it opens. You ask it to compute, it computes.
It just works.
Exactly. But when trust is low, it is like having a dozen heavy antivirus programs running in the background all at once.
Oh, yeah.
They are scanning every single file. They're intercepting every single click. They're demanding permission for every minor action. It eats up all your CPU and slows the entire machine down to an absolute crawl.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the sociology here. Those antivirus programs in society represent the lawyers, the complex contracts, the security cameras, the endless background checks.
The bureaucratic red tape.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of it. And to be fair, they are absolutely necessary when the societal operating system is compromised by bad actors. But they consume a massive amount of energy and capital just to maintain a baseline level of functionality.
Right. Let's follow that antivirus analogy into the dark side of this concept, because the source goes there. If a high-trust society is neurologically efficient, what physically happens to the human brain when that system is constantly scanning for threats?
It's not pretty.
Think about the last time you, as a listener, had to deal with a shady contractor, or you had to comb through a 50-page terms of service agreement because you suspected a company was trying to trap you in a subscription.
We've all been there.
That exhaustion you feel after those interactions, is it your brain paying an actual biological tax?
It is entirely a biological tax. According to the source, this is the harsh reality of living in a low-trust society, which they describe as being neurologically expensive.
Neurologically expensive, wow.
Yeah. In this environment, every single interaction breeds suspicion. You cannot simply shake hands on a deal. Every agreement requires extensive legal buffering. And let's look at the neuroscience of this state, because it's fascinating.
Please do.
When you live in a low-trust environment, your amygdala, which is the brain's primitive threat detection center, basically its alarm bell, never gets to power down.
It just stays on.
It remains locked in a state of hypervigilance.
Because the environment demands that the alarm keeps ringing, you have to stay alert.
Exactly. And the consequence of that constant alarm is that your cortisol levels remain chronically elevated.
So you are just flooded with stress.
You are effectively marinating your brain in stress hormones that are meant only for short-term survival scenarios, like running from a predator.
Not reading a contract.
Right.
Wait, so the text implies this creates a vicious cycle. Nick notes that chronic stress impairs the cognitive functions needed to rebuild trust. I want to dig into the mechanics of that for a second. How does cortisol physically prevent you from trusting again?
Well, it comes down to neuroplasticity and how the brain allocates its resources over time. Chronic cortisol exposure literally alters the physical pathways of your brain.
Wait, literally alters it?
Literally. It strengthens and thickens the neural pathways leading to the amygdala, making you faster and better at detecting fear and threat. But simultaneously, it degrades and weakens the connections to the prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex handles, the logic, the long-term planning.
Empathy, logic, nuance. Precisely those functions. So you are physically losing the biological hardware required to assess nuanced risk, or to extend the benefit of the doubt, or take a leap of faith on a new relationship.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You become biologically hardwired for paranoia. Maya has this really profound realization in the dialogue when she connects these dots.
What'd you say?
She realizes that when trust collapses due to rampant broken promises or systemic corruption, it is not just a moral failing of that community. It is a literal neurological disaster for the citizens.
So a toxic environment physically traps you in a biological feedback loop. You literally lose the neurological capacity to repair the social fabric that you rely on to survive.
You are physiologically blocked from participating in the behaviors that would lower your own stress.
Okay, look, I have to stop you there and push back on this, because I imagine anyone listening is having the exact same thought right now.
Sure.
I hear the words trust and lowering threat detection in the same sentence, and if I am out in the real cutthroat world, turning off my threat detection just sounds like I am volunteering to be a victim.
Yeah, you sound like an easy target.
Right. And Maya actually brings this up in the text, too. She says, isn't being trusting just incredibly naive? Like, if the world is full of predators and scammers, isn't cynicism and high threat detection literally the skill that keeps you alive?
It is the most logical objection to raise. I mean, if the system is compromised, uninstalling your antivirus software is a terrible idea.
Exactly.
But the source material makes a vital distinction here to address that exact point. It separates blind trust from evidence-based trust.
Okay. Meaning you aren't just walking down a dark alley handing out your wallet, hoping for the best.
Not at all. Blind trust, which is trust without any empirical evidence, simply hoping people will do the right thing, is incredibly dangerous, and it's often punished.
Right.
But evidence-based trust is an entirely different mechanism. This is trust that emerges from repeated, verified, positive interactions over time.
Okay, that makes sense.
And from an evolutionary standpoint, the text argues that the capacity for this kind of trust isn't a weakness at all. It's actually our ultimate survival strategy.
But how does the text square that with the idea of survival of the fittest?
Yeah.
Because usually we think of the ruthless apex predator winning the day, the lone wolf.
Well, if we look at the evolutionary record, human beings did not survive because we were the strongest animals on the savannah.
We really weren't.
No, we were slow, our skin was thin, we didn't have sharp claws or formidable fangs. We survived exclusively through group cooperation.
Because a lone human is just a snack for a lion.
Exactly.
But 50 humans with spears who trust each other enough to hold a defensive formation, that becomes the apex predator.
And maintaining that 50-person formation requires an immense amount of complex, evidence-based trust. Evolutionarily speaking, trust allowed us to outsource our individual security to the group.
Which frees up the brain to do other things.
Exactly. It frees up our brain's processing power to invent, to forage, to build. It is the most efficient form of social organization ever discovered.
Wow. And the text also provides some fascinating macroeconomic proof to back this up, moving beyond ancient history into modern data.
Yeah, the real-world numbers.
The claim is that countries with the highest levels of social trust consistently exhibit the highest levels of economic prosperity, public health, and overall happiness. And it heavily stresses this is causation, not just a neat coincidence. I really want to explore the causality there.
Let's do it.
Why does societal trust literally equal higher GDP and better health?
Think about the concept of economic friction.
Okay.
In a high-trust economy, friction is low. You can launch a bakery, for example. You rent a space with a basic lease. You buy flour on credit from a local supplier who trusts you'll pay them after you sell your first batch of bread, and you just open your doors. The capital flows smoothly.
And in a low-trust economy?
The friction is insurmountable. To open that exact same bakery, you need a team of lawyers to negotiate a hostile lease.
Right.
You need to buy expensive security cameras to prevent theft, and you have to pay up front in cash for all your supplies because absolutely no one extends credit in a low-trust environment.
So the overhead cost of doing business just skyrockets.
Exactly. The capital is paralyzed by the fear of confiscation or fraud. People refuse to invest or innovate because the environment doesn't provide the evidence that their efforts will be fairly rewarded.
Yeah, it goes right back to that antivirus analogy. The computer isn't broken, but all the resources are diverted to scanning for threats, so no actual work gets done.
Perfect way to see it.
I imagine the public health aspect ties directly into those cortisol levels we discussed earlier.
It ties in perfectly. I mean, when a population trusts that their taxes are funding schools and roads instead of lining a corrupt politician's pockets, they pay them willingly.
Which improves public infrastructure.
Yes. And when you aren't living in a constant state of hypervigilance regarding your neighbors, your baseline societal cortisol level drops. The sheer reduction in stress-related illnesses, heart disease, and anxiety disorders in high-trust societies is staggering.
This paints a very clear sequential picture. Evidence-based trust leads to biological efficiency, which lowers economic friction, which leads to societal prosperity.
That's the formula.
But that brings us to the ultimate practical problem of the text. If you are sitting in a society or managing a company or even just navigating a family dynamic that is currently low trust and trapped in that paranoid biological feedback loop, how do you actually build trust from scratch? How do you break the cycle?
The transition from the problem to the solution relies on the blank slate theory detailed in the dialogue between Maya and Nick.
The blank slate theory.
Yeah. The core premise is that no human child is born cynical.
Right. We don't come out of the womb demanding a lawyer.
We don't. Distrust is a learned survival adaptation. We learn it through experiencing betrayals, through enduring broken promises, through navigating institutional systems that actively reward dishonesty while punishing vulnerability.
Our brains learn to put the guard up because the environment demands it.
Precisely. But the hopeful flip side of neuroplasticity is that if a behavior is learned in response to an environment, it can be unlearned if the environment changes.
That is the key to the physical rewiring process.
Yeah.
We talked about oxytocin being released through positive interactions.
Yes.
When you experience cooperation consistently and reliably, your brain begins to physically rewire itself to expect cooperation.
Your prefrontal cortex begins to gather new data. Over time, it uses this new ledger of positive evidence to actively override the amygdala's paranoid suspicion.
Wow.
But the crucial caveat is that the environment must consistently prove itself to be safe.
The evidence in evidence-based trust. It can't just be a promise, it has to be action. And this is where the text highlights the make-or-break role of institutions, whether that is a government justice system, a corporate leadership team, or just the adults in a household.
Institutions are the architects of the environment. They set the rules of engagement.
So when leaders are demonstrably accountable, when the rules apply equally to the CEO and the entry-level intern, when decision-making is transparent, trust grows.
Not because people are naive, but because the actual empirical evidence in their daily lives supports it.
Their prefrontal cortex looks at the data of how the institution behaves and says, okay, the system is secure. It is safe to turn off the antivirus.
And conversely, when those institutions lie, when the rules are rigged to favor a few, that trust collapses instantly.
It just vanishes.
The tragic reality, Nick points out, is that rebuilding trust takes exponentially longer than destroying it.
Why is that?
Because a single betrayal validates the amygdala's fears. But you have to provide overwhelming long-term evidence of safety to calm a hyperactive threat detection system once it has been triggered. You are fighting millions of years of evolutionary survival mechanisms.
When you zoom all the way out and look at the foundation Maya and Nick are outlining, it leads to an incredible realization. It means that rebuilding trust in a fractured society, or even repairing a broken personal relationship, isn't a public relations campaign.
No, not at all.
It isn't a political slogan. It is a literal biological intervention.
That synthesis captures the SACE perfectly.
Sure.
Every time a leader keeps their word, every time a transparent, equitable decision is made, it is not merely a nice ethical choice.
Right.
It is a neurological intervention that is physically healing the brains of the people involved. It's slowly restoring their biological capacity to cooperate.
Maya's conclusion in the source material is deeply resonant on this point. She realizes that in a profoundly low-trust world, the most radical, rebellious act you can commit is simply to be trustworthy.
It places the immense power of rebuilding a civilization squarely on the shoulders of our individual daily choices. The architecture of trust is built one interaction at a time.
It really is. And that brings us directly to you listening to this deep dive. Take a second today to reflect on your own daily life, your own social operating system. Think about your interactions over the past week.
Yeah, take an inventory.
When was the last time you actively extended evidence-based trust to someone? And, just as importantly, when did you withdraw it to protect yourself? The text leaves us with a haunting question to carry with us. If trust is the invisible foundation of every civilization, what are you building with your daily choices, a bridge or a wall?
Building on that, the text focus on biology raises a crucial modern question for you to mull over as you go about your routine today.
Okay, let's hear it.
We have established that evidence-based trust requires repeated, verified physical interactions to trigger oxytocin and rewire the prefrontal cortex.
This is like biological data gathering.
But look at our modern era. So many of our interactions today are fleeting, anonymous, and entirely digital.
So true.
We are buying things from faceless algorithms. We are arguing with avatars on screens. We are missing the eye contact, the vocal microtremors, the subtle physical cues that our biology has relied on for thousands of years to assess safety.
We aren't getting the physical evidence.
Exactly. So the question is, in our shift toward a digital existence, are we fundamentally starving our biology of the very interactions it requires to build societal trust?
Wow. Are we architecting a digital world that our own biological foundation simply cannot support? That is an incredible, slightly terrifying thought to leave on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go out into the world today, just remember, the concrete and the steel might look like what is holding everything up, but the real foundation is invisible, it is chemical, and its strength depends entirely on the evidence we provide to each other. Take care.